Welcome to another Wisdom podcast. We have Richard Peiser with us. He is a professor of real estate development at Harvard University, a Michael D. Spear professor, that is. We're going to talk about real estate today, a subject that we don't often talk on this podcast. Michael is in Laguna Beach. I am in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I said Michael, it's Richard. Um, like my dad. So we're gonna speak about real estate around the world, supply chains, inflation, capital markets, offshoring in China and Europe, etc. This podcast is brought to you by podpar.com. If you want to start your own podcast or scale your podcast, you can go to podpar.com. I can help you scale your pod the unconventional way. Michael, welcome to the Richard. I don't know why Michael is thinking. Richard, welcome to the pods. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast. At the moment, I'm vacationing at a home we have in Laguna Beach, having just finished a week-long site visit with 24 students and 4 faculty members to Alameda Naval Air Station in San Francisco, which is the subject of a class project.
And tell me a bit more about what you teach nowadays, what questions your students have for you. I believe that affordable housing is definitely a topic that is coming up nowadays. What questions your students typically have for you?
Well, first, the courses I teach are on real estate finance and development, and we cover financial techniques and mechanisms and development of all property types all around the world. My particular specialty is very large-scale development, ranging from new towns to 1,000-acre military bases that are repositioning, to large tracts in downtowns and suburban town centers and urban sprawl. Over the years, I've worked on everything from periphery development to rejuvenating decaying urban core. It's all exciting, and this is an interesting moment in time, I think, in the real estate industry. In general, people are quite bullish at the moment, mainly because interest rates seem to have plateaued and are starting to come down. That said, there's a huge concern about the overhang of office space, both nationally and internationally, and the possibility that bankrupt office buildings could put a drag on banks and cause more bank failures like we did see in the Silicon Valley Bank. However, the government has indicated they will step up to the plate and not let those failures become more contagious, as happened in the 2008 financial crisis.
So let's say that I'm 20 years old. If I'm at Harvard, my parents probably have money of some kind. How should I get started in real estate?
Well, first, let me dispel the notion that most people at Harvard are rich, because I think about 70% of the people there are on financial aid of some form or another. How to get started in real estate? Well, I would distinguish between being an investor in real estate and being a developer. I do focus on development, whether it's ground up development to buying an old apartment building and doing a value add that increases the value. The best way to get started, in my view, is to go out and do it, to go out and buy a house and fix it up, buy a small apartment building and fix it up and start renting it out. But there are also many different disciplines that are part of being a successful real estate player. It's a very generalist field. So you need to know something about the law, about urban planning, about transportation, about water and sewer infrastructure. And most important, you have to know how to deal with people. So the best real estate players are the best salesmen and the best, most talented at working with people.
Right. And where do they find this capital usually to buy that first property?
Ah, well, uh, if you don't have it yourself, it comes from family and friends. Usually, is the first place you go. Uh, it doesn't take a huge amount of capital, but in general, if you don't have something like $50,000 lying around, it's probably hard to be a player, and not the least of which um, being an active investor, as distinguished from just going out and buying a condo or something and renting it out. But even property management can take a lot of time if you're doing it yourself. But if you have another full-time job, uh, that can sometimes make it hard to go out and do it yourself.
Right. So get a job, save up, I guess. Then usually to have the type of money to buy literally a town, like you mentioned at the start of the podcast, when should that be? Is it like 20, 30 years in? How to get there fast?
Well, one of my themes of writing is, why do new towns almost always lose money? So my main advice is, do not become a new town developer. It takes billions of dollars to do it successfully. And even uh, uh, like the king of Saudi Arabia has built a couple of new towns, and with all the money that they have, it can be a long haul before they actually produce cash flows. However,
Mm.
developing new towns is at one extreme of the real estate spectrum. The people who've gotten rich in real estate are those who pick a fairly narrow area and become the best in their community to delivering it.
Right. I guess there can be like smaller towns necessarily that don't require literal billions. For example, in Mexico, where I am right now, I guess couple of hundreds of millions could do it. But yeah, you need to do the aqueducts, you need to put the electricity in there and all of that. It's quite complex. Not sure if there's any ROI. I mean, there might be tax breaks or government help, but
Mhm.
talking about Neom, I would picture that project to be quite successful. I wouldn't be surprised if they would get an ROI in the next 15 to 20 years with that. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, which place again?
Yeah, Neom, the Saudi Arabia project, this the town called Neom. Have you heard about that one?
Actually, yes, I've heard about it, but I don't know much about it. The There's a new economic city near Jeddah that we did do some work on, which is thousands of acres and involves a port. But when we New towns are one extreme of development. There are many master plan communities of 200 to 500 acres, which have been very successful. But what distinguishes them from a new town is they tend to be focused on just building houses, whereas a new town would have manufacturing, industry, retail, play, people. It combines live, work, and play all in one location.
Right. There's various of these projects that could be attracting. In my native Quebec, there's a project called Dispelling that is south of Montreal, and it's at the intersection of two auto routes, and they built a whole bunch of stores there with a bunch of residential properties. That was, I think, the phase two or three of the project, right? So they borrow a bunch of money. Then they successfully prove that they can build the stores, that they do have cash flow. Then they go see the banks again for more money. And I guess if you're like a real estate entrepreneur like that, you're like very much in debt, but you have this humongous cash flow that keeps coming in. So basically, you can borrow however much money as you want, right?
No, it does not work that way. Nobody has an unlimited source of funding, not even um, the Sultan of Dubai, who had to go to the next sultanate to fund all of his spending in Dubai. Yeah. I mean, a rule of thumb is that if a project costs $10 million, you need 30% or 35% in equity. So if you don't have $3 to $3.5 million of cash equity, either through your own money or through other people's money, then you're not going to get the lender to put in the 6 or 7 million to go with it.
Right. So I guess it becomes a game of who's the next person you can borrow money from. So it's really like I wouldn't call it a borrowing scheme, but it's just like always fetch for new funds, always fetch for new investors in the project. And the more you have investors, the more it can magnify the next investors that's going to invest in your project.
Well, that's true to a certain extent, but most successful developers do not have an ever widening pool of investors and lenders. If they're doing a good job with the first investors, those investors will invest more. And banking is a relationship business. So if the first banks aren't happy with you, it's hard to go out and get other banks who will be. Now, Donald Trump may be the exception to the rule, but even Deutsche Bank, who funded most of his projects in New York, wish they hadn't.
Yeah, Trump was quite an interesting example because even after defaulting, I think they lent him the same bank lended money to him again, Doge. So that was quite fascinating. That was at another a former time, I guess, like that lenders would take on more risk. But what's the climate nowadays? Like, I guess it's a different time.
Yes, ever since the great financial crisis in 2008, banks have been much more conservative about lending. And that conservatism has actually helped us. It's why, in general, the real estate market is not so overbuilt now, and that's why I think people are generally uh, optimistic about the market coming ahead, especially as interest rates start to fall. There's a massive demand for housing in the United States. Of course, that demand increases the lower price you can deliver it, and there's lots of issues with doing that. But if you want to be in the real estate business and have a way to deliver housing, you will be successful.
Right. So let's say that, yeah, I'm a young student at Harvard. Is real estate still an interesting route to me compared to startups or tech companies in which I can build from a distance? I don't have to deal with stuff breaking physically. I can generate money almost out of thin air. So, what are my options? Do you still recommend going in real estate?
Well, yes, I do. Frankly, a lot of the excitement in real estate are all the technological inventions that are making it more efficient. Even cryptocurrency and blockchain. Uh, these are things that are happening as much in real estate as in other areas of business. It's an ebb and flow in terms of where students want to go. I would say we're coming off the dot-com craze. I think at the moment students are looking for, I guess, more tangible opportunities, of which real estate is one of them. But still, lots of students would love to be billionaires before they're 25, and the Facebook Zuckerberg example or Bill Gates is always out there.
Yeah, especially at Harvard, I must guess the Zuck story must run on repeat there. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Like me personally, the closest I'd get to real estate would be like an Airbnb. I think Airbnb has been this fascinating company, and I'm a big fan of opening doors. You know, Airbnb, it's tourism, but I would picture people renting on Airbnb any types of properties sooner or later. I think this is where the market would be going. Now, I think they've been drastically slowed down by COVID, but I think Airbnb still has a shot at being, this door to real estate. What other real tech businesses have you seen pop lately or are quite exciting to you?
Well, the Airbnb is one of the most exciting because it's all part of the sharing economy, very similar to Uber and Lyft, sharing real estate. And that is one of the areas of growth. Uh, we're actually doing some scholarship on this, and there's about 11 different technological categories that are relevant. It's across the board in real estate. Some of the more exciting stuff is in how you sell and market real estate through visualization and 3D imagery. So that's one area. There's huge innovation going on in smart buildings, how to, well, as um, having sensors all over the building that adjust the temperature and provide for fresh air. There are many innovations having to do with sustainability and how to build materials more efficiently. So the opportunities are out there, but having the unicorn that goes from a small company to a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded platform, those are still hard come by.
What have you been focused on research wise in the last couple of years?
Well, personally, yeah, I am very involved in affordable housing research, which, well, we have a paper coming out shortly on embedded carbon. Um, uh, the whole subject of sustainability has been very high on the national agenda for 20 years. Um, but it turns out that reducing carbon has been the way to operationalize making everything more sustainable. And of course, the buildings that we occupy contribute about 70% of the carbon into the air. So ways to reduce that are very important. And at least one of my themes of current research is that when you talk about reducing carbon in buildings, it's not just the energy that goes into heating it and air conditioning. It has to do with the production of the materials. Producing concrete and steel for a new building is a lot more carbon intensive than if you can refurbish buildings. Related to that is, what do you do with all these unoccupied office buildings? There's a lot of discussion about converting them into residential. And so another area of research is how many of those office buildings are really economically convertible? And the answer is lower than you would hope. It's 15 to 30% of the buildings that are out there. So the great thing about real estate is that it's always changing, and an expert today in an area isn't necessarily the expert tomorrow unless he or she stays on top of everything.
Your students, are they afraid not to get affordable housing? What questions do they come up to you as consumers?
Well, the key on affordable housing is that you really can't deliver it in most parts of the United States without some kind of a subsidy. And the subsidies, well, the main subsidy program in the US is tax credits, and there are severely limited tax credits are available. Now, there's a huge issue about how to reduce the cost of housing. The biggest impediment is NIMBYism, that people do not want lower cost affordable housing in their backyard. They don't want the higher densities. They don't want the congestion. And so a project that in Texas, where I'm from, you could build in 6 months may take 3 to 6 years in California or the East Coast because of the regulatory hurdles and the opposition by neighbors. A case in point, Massachusetts has one of the most progressive affordable housing laws in the United States that requires cities that are served by mass transit to adopt a more dense zoning district around the transit stations. That was just turned down in Milton. Milton's a wealthy suburb. They voted it down. So now we don't know what happens. They're basically defying the state. The state is responding by withholding grants, but it's still up to the people in Milton whether or not they're going to allow more apartments around the subway stops.
And some people have told me before, I mean, I'm not in that, I'm not affected by that situation, but they're like, yeah, as a 30-year-old, you're effed from, the rising cost of real estate. I'm in a different class myself, so not worried about that, but are most people worried about real estate? I know that Montreal people were freaking out and are still freaking out. I mean, if you're an immigrant and you're working on a minimum salary job in the US or in Canada, it can be quite worrying for them. It seems that the cost of food as well and inflation, and not all salaries are inflating with that. So how can these people survive?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. The high inflation period that we're now just coming off of has made housing much less affordable than most other commodities. And the bottom line is you're never going to bring down housing prices unless you increase supply. And the highly desirable places are the ones that typically restrict supply. So I'm afraid there is no easy fix.
In terms of your goals for this year, what do you have on the horizon for 2024, and why is teaching students still important for you?
Ah, well, I think teaching students, one, it's a lot of fun. Two, if you want to have an impact on what happens in the future, one of the great privileges of being at institutions like Harvard is that you get the best students from all over the world, and they will go back and have an impact through what they do. And hopefully we are imparting to them the best practices so they will do a good job. For my own, sorry about the dog in the background. His mother is about to return home. Uh, I'm involved in some of my own development projects in addition to teaching, and that's always fun. We're involved in restoring one of the great Vanderbilt mansions up in the Berkshires called Elm Court. And I also do industrial development and investing with some partners and friends in Southern California. And then the rest, I'm looking forward to a sabbatical year where I'll be spending a lot of time working on new towns again, based in Cambridge, England.
And where can people find out more about you online, Richard?
Well, if you just Google my name, Peiser, Peiser, you'll come across a lot of my publications. I guess my biggest claim to fame is that the Urban Land Institute is a major organization that represents real estate developers. And I have a book that's their all-time bestseller on real estate development. So anyone who's interested in how to be a real estate developer, and it covers the basic product types, including residential, commercial, industrial, I would recommend that book.